On today's Locked On Thunder podcast, the Thunder suffer their first injury of the season. Is it a concern moving forward? Plus, Stock Watch, our preseason trends of who's trending up, who's trending down for each player on this roster.
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your teams every day. I am your host, media member, and beat writer for Thunder on SI, Ryland Styles. Follow me on Twitter at Ryland_Styles. Follow the show on Twitter at LOThunderPod. Email the show, LOThunderPod@gmail.com. On today's show, brought to you by Game Time, we're diving into the Oklahoma City Thunder suffering their first injury of the season. Plus, it's our annual preseason look at the roster. Whose stock is trending up? Whose stock is trending down? And the Thunder are quickly solidifying themselves as contenders. Today's show, again, is brought to you by our good friends over at Game Time. Go check out Game Time right now by downloading the Game Time app, creating your account, and using code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. In case you missed it, Locked On Thunder is back to 5 days a week, so subscribe anywhere you get your podcast from 5 days a week from now until next August at least. So it's going to be a lot of fun covering this team, covering this season. We're just around the corner. There's still exciting things happening for Locked On Sooners, for Locked On Pokes, but it's almost time for the NBA to ramp up, as we'll have training camp and media day in a couple of weeks, and then you know that once we reach that point, it's all systems go for the NBA. There was some interesting news crumbs today. There was some expansion stuff that we're going to get to tomorrow, but today, when you look at this Thunder roster, one of the biggest question marks has been what happens when they deal with injuries. As a matter of fact, it was brought up on yesterday's show when I was grading your hot takes that the Thunder would not have the same injury luck that they had a year ago. And on Tuesday morning, the team announced that Kenrich Williams underwent an operation, which has an undisclosed return, obviously, because he just had the operation, but we know we'll sideline him for training camp and for the preseason, as he will not be reevaluated for a couple of weeks here. This is similar to what happened a year ago. A year ago, Kenrich Williams missed training camp, missed preseason time because of a back injury. And he noticeably, throughout the stretch of last season, looked a little sluggish, a little stiff compared to how he normally looks. And so I don't think that, this injury today impacts Oklahoma City. Is Kenrich Williams a very good player? Absolutely. As a matter of fact, he's what helps the Thunder get to a point where they have the most positive impact players, according to Synergy, in the entire NBA. He's one of those 10 guys. He's a very good player, and he's especially good for the versatility, for the switchability, and for what the Thunder look for. He's especially good for what the Thunder try to do. But this right knee operation, which will now hold him out for until after the preseason, his reevaluation date is not until after the preseason's over. This is not something that you would expect the Thunder will play around with. Because the bottom line is, this team is deep enough, this team is good enough to where Kenrich Williams playing, not playing, playing heavy minutes, playing limited minutes is not going to be the absolute difference of if this team gets off to a hot start. Now, don't hear something that's not said. That's not to say that Kenrich Williams will not make a massive impact. He will. The value of a guy like Kenny Hustle is when games get more intense, is when games get more physical. We'll see what Caruso and Hartenstein bring. Of course, the reputation precedes them. But you look at last year's roster, where there were times where they got out-muscled, out-manned, punked. Like, they were just outright punked against Dallas at times last year, except for Kenrich Williams, who by himself physically turned around an entire game on the road in Dallas. He's not only an emotional leader, he's a physical leader for this team. And you've seen him fight Minnesota. You've seen him, of course, turn that game around in Dallas, which was a staple point of that series. And it can all be drawn back to, that's why you can sit here and brag about losing in 6 games and brag about a 0-point differential. It's because of that game and because of that moment from Kenrich Williams whenever this team stopped getting punked for that period of time. There's very few guys who can go rattle a cage on this roster the way that Kenrich Williams can. His value is not going to be seen in November. His value is seen when these games truly feel at the height of importance. That's down the stretch of a seeding run. That's in the postseason. And last year, dealing with that back injury, he still played well last season. But again, there were moments where, man, he couldn't get on the floor. The once staple of the Thunder rotation could not get on the floor. And this is assumptive. This is speculative. I have to imagine that in some ways it stems back to that back injury. And so this is another year where you come into a season with an ailment. And hopefully for Kenrich Williams, it's nothing, right? But I think you've got to do everything you can to ensure it's nothing. You've got to do everything you can to ensure that he looks more fresh and he looks better down the stretch of this season compared to what he looked like down the stretch of last season. And so that's why I'm not gravely concerned with the possibility of him missing opening night or the possibility of him, missing time into the season or needing, a huge swing in minutes in terms of some rest nights or whatever it looks like when he returns. Whatever his return to play looks like, it's not going to concern me. Because this team is so good and so deep and so talented that if Kenrich Williams is what's swinging things, you've likely got some bigger issues. And not to say that he can't swing things, because he will. There will be games where he swings the outcome, as he did in Dallas after really not playing that whole series. He was still ready to go, and he still won you a playoff game. I wholeheartedly believe that without that chippy sequence with Kenrich Williams, you do not win that game. And Kenrich, you can stem it back to him for a whole playoff game. And so whenever you look at this injury, of course, you'd much rather go into a season full strength. But I don't think that this will derail or limit them from their absolute end goal. And these things are going to happen. These injuries are going to pop up. And you're going to have to roll with the punches a little bit, as they did a year ago. They're still in the exact same boat that they were in a year ago, where they also did not have Kenny Hustle in the preseason training camp portion of the season. So that was one bit of news that came out. Another bit of news was the jersey leak. If you're into City Connect jerseys, City Edition jerseys, well, the good news is you can pretty much just wear last year's City Edition jersey. It's the exact same in a way. Like, it looks pretty similar. Especially the piping on the side looks very similar. I think that these are a slight upgrade to last year, especially whenever you see the mock-ups that include the number and it makes it look more whole. Then you can really see the vision. My real question is, they still have the last year's City Edition court laid down. Did they make these jerseys so similar to where they can just run it back with that same court, which I think is a fantastic court. I think it's the best court they've ever played on. The only concern with that would be, like, these jerseys look to be black instead of navy, and black and navy typically don't mix, although we've kind of blurred the lines on that in the fashion world recently. We've blurred a lot of lines, frankly. But if you're into City Edition news, you can go see pictures of it on Twitter at Ryland_Styles. And another note on that jersey, it only says Oklahoma. It does not say Oklahoma City, just Oklahoma. I thought that was pretty cool too, to kind of embrace and embody, which the organization's done a really good job of. Like, they've done really good at embracing this being a statewide team, but it reflecting on a jersey is pretty cool as well. So that's your City Edition leaked jersey info for this season, as well as what we know about the Kenrich Williams injury that was released on Tuesday morning. Coming up, we will do our annual stock watch. Whose stock is rising? Whose stock is falling? But first, let's say right now about our good friends over at Game Time. Go check out the Game Time app, and there's no better time than right now to check it out. I'll tell you why. Both Norman and Stillwater host massive football games. The Sooners play their first SEC game against my Tennessee Volunteers. The Pokes out there playing Utah in a Big 12 showdown. And you can get those tickets at Game Time. All in pricing. What you see is what you get. A view from your seat, which I love. I've only been to an OU game twice. I've never been to an OSU game yet. So I need to go out there and see the Stillwater venue. And I can get a preview of my seat with the view from your seat on Game Time. So check it out today at Game Time. It's the lowest prices guaranteed, or else they'll credit you 110% of the difference. So go there right now and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase at the Game Time app and GameTime.com. Terms and conditions apply. But again, create your account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off at Game Time. Game Time is fantastic. You want to go check them out today. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Folks, we're almost back. And you know, if you listen to the show for a long time, we have our annual stock watch where we say who's trending up, who's trending down. We do this in the preseason. We do this in the middle of the season, near the deadline, near the All-Star break, somewhere in there. We do this before the playoffs. And at the start of the offseason, heading into making some big decisions around this franchise. So we have these benchmarks. Here's the benchmark for this season. So we're going to go through the entire roster and tell you whose stock is trending up, whose stock is trending down. SGA, his stock is still trending up. Not only is he a top 5 player in the NBA, but I still believe that he will improve on his game, which has been phenomenal, which has been fantastic, and which has been a top 5 clip in the NBA. So whenever you look at SGA's game, I think that one, the always appealing aspect will be, what if this is the year that he takes a leap in three-point shooting? Sure, that would be fantastic. You can go read about that at SI Thunder. But what I saw for Team Canada, whenever he understood playmaking at a higher level with Team Canada, like that, what he was able to pull off for Team Canada, where he's passing guys open, he's understanding how to use his gravity and how to, get guys in scoring position rather than just simply make the right read, like looking to set guys up and everything. That was a different gear from Shai as a playmaker, and one that will be very necessary for this season, and one that I think gets heightened when he plays for the Thunder versus Team Canada. No offense to Team Canada, even though they did completely disappoint this year. They do not have the playmakers and secondary playmakers and connective playmakers that the Thunder have. Few teams in the NBA do. Few teams in basketball do. This team's identity is built on whoever you pass the ball to, you can trust them to go make the right decision. Very few times will you see a play unfold and go, ooh, yikes, not a good play. So if Shai can capture that improved playmaking and display it at the NBA level, then you're looking at someone who can take another leap, for as crazy as that sounds. And it sounds crazy today on September 17th in the year of our Lord 2024, but every single year to this point, Shai's been improved, and we already have a glimpse of how he can improve this season. So the stock is still trending up for SGA, who should be the leader for the MVP award. Isaiah Hartenstein, his stock, I think, is trending up. Because what you give Isaiah Hartenstein, along with the contract, and you can talk about the money, you can talk about the years, that's all fine and well. What that comes with, though, is not just expectations, because anytime you pay a guy the second most money on the team, no matter the context, they're going to be heavily scrutinized. But it also comes with security. Security for a guy who's bounced around the NBA, who's tried to work his way to a solidified part of a rotation, who's tried to work his way into a solidified roster spot and into the money he ended up getting this summer. And so that stability is going to be huge for anybody. But more so than that stability, the belief that the Thunder have already expressed. And mind you, the Thunder have only been able to talk about Isaiah Hartenstein publicly one time. And it was right after the signing was official. And in that short time where we're standing around talking to Hartenstein, talking to Sam Presti, the belief that they have in each other and the belief that the Thunder have in Isaiah Hartenstein, that changes things for players. The way that Sam Presti continued to talk about Hartenstein as just a 26-year-old, as a guy who can still develop, as a guy who still has a lot to gain in his game, and the projecting nature that Hartenstein had of like, I have a coach that's going to let me explore things differently than what happened with Tom Thibodeau, than what happened with, previous stops. It gets you excited for what things can look like. And more important than all of that, Hartenstein began to get his flowers at the end of last season, clearly, because he had to fill in heavy doses for the Knicks. Anytime that New York is good, they are in the brightest spotlight there is. But by all accounts, you're going to be playing, I don't care if you start or not, you're going to be playing a ton of minutes for the best team in the West. That's going to come with a different level of perception, a different level of recognition. And for as much as he got those flowers at the end of last year, you still look around and there's a sentiment, even from people who you might respect in the basketball world, there's still a sentiment of, that's a lot of money to give to a role player. Well, he's not just a role player. Like Hartenstein, no matter if he starts or not, and I don't think he will. I've been very vocal about that. But no matter if he starts or not, he's the very best backup center in the league when that was your only deficiency a year ago. And we can talk about Giddy Caruso, and we've done that on plenty of pods this summer. Your biggest discrepancy in a series in which you had a 0-point differential in totality was whenever Chet Holmgren left the floor. And you've immediately fixed that, and not just patchworked it, not just improved it. You went out and got the very best backup center, and whenever that happens, and the gear that can take the Thunder to, that changes how the contract is viewed. It changes how his perception as a player is viewed. And I do believe in the Thunder's player development. And if they continue to harp on how much they believe in him and believe that this is not the end for him, this is not the ceiling for him, you have to say that stock is trending up. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. So I think that this season, it'll all come to a head. Where right now, it's easy to talk numbers. It's easy to talk $30 million for a guy who only made 5 points a game. It's easy to talk about all that stuff right now. Everything will quickly change once this season begins. And even locally, there's some people holding out on the fact that the Thunder spent money that they had to spend. It was use or lose it money on Hartenstein for a basketball reference page that's not sexy. Listen, the basketball reference page does not have to look any type of way, right? How efficient can you be? How impactful can you be? He checks those boxes, and he's one of those guys where once you're watching him every single night, you start to see why you went out and got this opportunity, and you went out and got this player, and you paid this money for the biggest free agent you've ever signed. And yeah, you had to overpay, quote unquote, a little bit, but I don't think it's an overpay to go get the very best backup center whenever that was your team's only flaw. And at least it was your only team's, glaring, just out of this world flaw. Because there is no perfect team. Even with Hartenstein, will not be perfect. But the holes that pop up will not sink the ship, I don't think. Compared to how last year, eventually it got to a point where the lack of front court depth sunk the ship. So we'll move on down to Lu Dort. Lu Dort's stock, I think, is just middling. It's holding. He's not losing value. He's also not gaining value. Like, it's just Lu Dort. Like, I think that this is just who he is. I cannot keep coming on here and trying to convince you that Lu Dort will become a good rim finisher. He's never done it to this point in his career. Even when he's gotten better incrementally, he's still a disaster at the rim for the most part. What has gotten better, though, is his three-point shooting. And what has gotten better, though, is his decision making. And what has gotten better is his belief in himself to just be a 3-and-D player, and the comfortability of, okay, I don't need the ball in my hands. I don't need to go try to drive to the basket. I'm a 3-and-D guy. And that was partly something that he had to figure out, but it was also partly out of necessity. Like, it was partly out of, listen, whenever you have a team that's only winning 20-something games, there's only a few players who want the ball and are confident enough to have the ball in their hands, and it led to shooting out of necessity and being an offensive force out of there's no one else to do it. Right? But as you've put better players around him, to his credit, he's taken a step back offensively. He's taken a step up efficiently. And he's became a positive impact player offensively, and we know what he is defensively. So when I say that Lu Dort is kind of plateauing, it's kind of just like staying put, that's still a great thing. He's still a top 100 player in the league, in the world. Like, Lu Dort is still awesome. And I think the way that he gets better is by simply not having Josh Giddey on the roster, because while they were defending Lou the same way that they defended Josh, when you have two guys out there getting defended that way, it throws off the entire feng shui. When it's just one guy, and that said guy can shoot near 40% from three, okay, now we're talking. Like, now we're getting somewhere with how you can punish defenses. So I think that that's important as well. Isaiah Joe, another guy who I just think, he is what he is at this point. He's maintaining high value. The value is still there, one, because you still sign him to a great contract. That's a fantastic contract. Number two, he has an elite NBA trait, which is his shooting and his gravity. Number three, he's proven, and he'll continue to prove, that he can stay on the floor defensively in the playoffs. And that's always the big concern with shooters and with guys who have this specialty in this frame. Can they stay on the floor? Isaiah Joe unequivocally can. And you saw the leap he made defensively last year. That's why I think that, is there another leap coming? I don't think so. But there doesn't have to be. He's still a fantastic player, and he still is holding really good value. And then we have Chet Holmgren. Chet Holmgren's stock is still on a massively high trajectory. Partly because of himself, the work ethic that he displays, number one, the potential we know he has as a scorer on the ball, number two, and the way that he can unlock different things for himself offensively. And also, his stock is trending up largely because of other people, right? You're gonna have a step from shape in the playmaking category. If that's correct, if that really happens, who is the biggest beneficiary of it? Chet Holmgren. If you find him earlier in the pick and roll, if you're Shea, if you're J-Dub, like, that's going to immediately feed him easier buckets. That's going to get him on an uptick swing. And then he was already an elite defender last year as a rookie, which is so just alarmingly hard to do, that now, a year into his career, with his work ethic, I still think that there's a leap coming defensively, which is hard to even grasp because he was so good defensively last year. So that's where we're at with Stockwatch. And coming up, we'll finish out the roster. But first, I want to say right now about our good friends over at FanDuel. Folks, check out FanDuel right now because it's a lot of fun. And you are not going to want to miss these incredible deals. At FanDuel, anyone can go to FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. And when you go there, you can get a free trial, 3-week free trial of the NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV when you bet $5. All you have to do is bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of the NFL Sunday Ticket. Go there right now to FanDuel.com, download America's #1 sports book, and you can go check them out. Perhaps, you only care about the NBA. You only like the NBA. Maybe that's your style. That's your thing. And that's okay if that is. But guess what? You can go bet on the NBA right now. Yes, today. You can not only bet on the future of who will win MVP, where Shea is third. You can go bet on the Thunder to win the West, where they're the top odds to win the West. You can also bet on opening night. The Thunder are underdogs on opening night in Denver. If you believe that they'll start 1-0 as they're 2-2 under Mark Daigneault on opening nights, go bet on the Thunder at FanDuel.com if you want to. And if you place a $5 bet, you get NFL Sunday ticket for 3 weeks. It's awesome there at FanDuel.com. We're back on the Locked On Thunder podcast, on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every single morning, every single day. We're here for you talking Thunder basketball. Next up is Aaron Wiggins. Aaron Wiggins on Stockwatch. I have him trending a tick up, largely because, number one, the contract is still a huge bargain. It's a huge value. But with that contract has to come a more stable rotational role for him, which he began getting stable minutes down the stretch of the season and, of course, in the playoffs and all that great stuff. With a full season of stable minutes and another full season of playing highly impactful basketball at a multitude of positions and another playoff opportunity in front of fans, like this will make his perception skyrocket, even if we already know how good he is at all this stuff. The perception of him, the way he's discussed will continue to climb. So I have Wiggins slightly increasing. Alex Caruso, another slight increase, because I think that everyone understands, like whenever you look at Caruso, you understand he's a good player. You understand that he helps you win. You understand that this was a good trade, for the Thunder, and also a good trade for Josh Giddey, but a good trade for the Thunder. You understand all that. Where I think Caruso's stock is still going up is, first and foremost, if that's who he is as a defender in Chicago, 2-time all-defensive member, and yes, the Bulls have gotten the most that they possibly can out of that roster defensively, and it's actually been pretty impressive what they've been able to do defensively with their personnel. Okay, well, now put him next to Lou Dort. Now put him next to Cason Wallace. Now put him next to Chet Holmgren and Hartenstein and Shea. Like, you can't craft a bad defensive lineup in Oklahoma City. And when you put him next to these elite defenders, as an elite defender himself, it's going to look historic. So that goes up. Even though we already know he's an all-defensive member twice in his career. What also goes up is, again, while we can all acknowledge that Caruso's a really good player, he's one of those guys where when you watch him all 82 games, when you watch him in the playoffs, and everyone who's listening to this show right now in September is going to watch every single game. When you see him nightly, and you're not told about him, you're not seeing clips, you're watching him. You're watching every little detail of Alex Caruso. You fall in love with the hustle plays. You fall in love with the plays that don't go in the stat sheet. Caruso is an Oklahoman star in every way of the word. If you were to describe what Okies look for in a basketball player, there would be a picture of Alex Caruso next to that definition. For as long as Oklahomans have liked basketball, they've liked guys like Alex Caruso. And so I think that will continue to climb. Of like right now, they're excited. They know he's good, but he is going to be an absolute fan favorite, just like Cason Wallace is an absolute fan favorite after just 1 year. And I told you all that back in July, but seeing it for yourself and seeing it on display, the perception of Cason to where it was on draft night when people were complaining about another guard, completely different. And so that's why I believe that Caruso is going up. Now we get to Kenny Hustle, who we talked a lot about at the start of the show. There's no other way to say than it's going down for Kenny Hustle. And that's not as though it's a massive decline. It's not alarming. It's not a call the National Guard for help situation. But it is going down a little bit. You saw at the end of last year, he couldn't get into the rotation. You saw at times last year, he looked a bit sluggish, looked a bit stiff, just did not have that same presence a year ago. But then he snaps out of it and immediately makes that massive play and massive game in Dallas. So it's a mixed bag at best, right? It's a mixed bag. And now for the second straight training camp, there's an injury. He's 30 years old, but a relatively old 30 with the way that he's been asked to play. Right? He's not just a 30-year-old 6'6" player. He's a 30-year-old 6'6" player that has spent a lot of time at the 5 position. So again, it's not as though you need to sell all of your Kenny Hustle stock. I would encourage you to sell none of it. But at this very moment, you got to have diamond hands. At this very moment, it's trending down, but hold strong. Hold strong, because I think that's going to come back up. Cason Wallace, another young player that you just cannot say anything but going up with. Like Cason Wallace, if all he was what he was as a rookie, and for the rest of his career he just duplicates that season over and over and over again, that is a phenomenal career. That's a fantastic draft pick. It's a great hit rate. It's a great career. I don't believe that all he'll do is copy and paste that year. I believe he'll improve as a defender, which takes him to another universe. I believe he'll improve as an offensive weapon with the ball in his hands as a playmaker. And so when those things start to check off, then you've transformed who he is as a player, as a 21-year-old. Kentucky guard, all that good stuff. Stock trending up. Ousmane Dieng. Stock is trending down. Oh, and some of it is not even due to his own fault. Because I've illustrated it on podcasts. I've written about it on SI Thunder. Oos played really well in the G League. He made the improvements. He did all the right things in the G League. He developed at the rate that they want to. The organization views him, in my belief, as a player who's on track for what they had in mind in 2022. But that was 2022, and things have changed in a dramatic way. Do I believe that the Thunder are going to give up on Ousmane Dieng? No. If I had to guess how this goes, is that Oos is playing a lot in October and November, and he'll either sink or swim when it comes to that rotational spot. But decision day and judgment day is quickly coming. And he didn't exactly knock your socks off in Summer League. I think that opening game left a bad taste in everybody's mouth, and he actually had to recover from it at the end of Salt Lake City. But the stock has to be going down right now for Ousmane Dieng. And again, largely because of other factors than himself, because he himself has continued to improve. I think that he's a candidate for a guy like a Trey Mann, who at the deadline, you send him somewhere like Charlotte, and he starts to perform over there, and you're just like, whoa, where'd this come from? Well, it was always there. It's just that the dimensions and the requirements changed for Oklahoma City. So we'll see if that actually happens for Oos. So what happens with Oos? He's one of the biggest question marks entering this season. And then you have J-Dub. J-Dub, stock just like Chet, is going up. The sky is still the limit for what he can achieve. And my hot take on Friday's show is that all three, Shea, Chet, and J-Dub, will go to the All-Star game. I still believe that. I think that J-Dub is that good. And then you have J-Will and Dylan Jones. We won't do the two-way guys today. If you want the two-way guys, we'll do that tomorrow at the end of the show. Leave a comment on YouTube. Tweet at me at Ryland_Styles if you want that. But when you look at J-Will stock is middling in actuality. I don't know what the terminology is on the stock market for this, but it's one of those stocks that either is going a tick down or just middling, but every broker is telling you buy. Like, everyone's telling you to buy, and you don't understand it. You don't see the vision, but these are people you trust and respect telling you to buy. You should buy J-Will, even if you don't know why you're buying him. Because I'll tell you why you're buying him. Number one, if he just plays at the level he played a year ago, where he improved defensively, where he improved as an efficient offensive player, and now he's your third string center and not your second string center, that version of a player as your third string center is immense value. And number two, it was made a big deal because of Chet. I think it should have been made a big deal because of J-Will, the fact that those two guys only played together for 2% of their minutes. That Chet Holmgren only played with a big man for 2% of those minutes. And that was made a big deal for Chet. I think that the bigger deal is, hey, J-Will only got to play next to a big for 2% of his minutes. When I think he naturally is more of a 4 at the NBA level, especially with how much of the Thunder switch and everything, him getting to play next to Hartenstein with his shooting ability and his passing ability and Hartenstein's passing ability, I think it can unlock some things for J-Will. So I'm willing to gamble a little bit on stock for Jay Will. And then for Dylan Jones, I don't know how you put Dylan Jones on the board yet. I could see it going either way of one, like Kaysen, where at this time for Kaysen Wallace last year, we were saying, he'll play for the Blue. He'll get some chances for the Thunder. He'll play for the Blue. He'll develop. He'll grow. And then Kaysen goes into training camp, and it's just, this guy's impressing. Everybody's raving about him. Mark is raving about him for the word go. Like, everybody is praising Kaysen Wallace. And you quickly knew, and you can go check the tapes. You can go check last October before the season started. I told you he's going to be in the rotation all year. He was. Like, this guy, just impressed everyone and changed the trajectory of what his season looked like from this time a year ago. I think that if anyone can do that on this roster, it's Dylan Jones, because Dylan Jones has that it factor. He has that maturity on the basketball court, and he has what the Thunder clearly like. For the Thunder to target someone in back-to-back drafts and then trade 5 second-round picks for you, the Thunder have to love you as a player. From top to bottom of this organization, everybody has to love him for that to happen. And so, if I had to put money on it, I do think that the smart option is he'll play for the G League the majority of the time. However, without other information and without seeing training camp yet, how do you make that jurisdiction yet? So that's kind of where I'm at with Dylan Jones. I would say that there's nothing on the board yet. I don't know what the terminology is for that either. I'm not a stock guy, clearly, but get it on him early. I would personally buy stock in him. I think he's gonna be a really good player, but in terms of what his trend is, there's no trend quite yet. So thank you for listening to today's show. We'll have Brendan Rabar on an episode this week, and we'll be back 5 days a week. We'll talk expansion. We'll talk with Brendan Rabar about questions for this team to answer, and we'll continue on 5 day a week Thunder podcasts here on Locked On Thunder. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcast from, and until tomorrow, be good and be good to one.